Yeah, I would have. Right, that's a fort. That's a fort right there.
All right, good evening. It's 5 p.m. Tuesday, September 12th. This special city council meeting workshop. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, you want to do roll call?
Absolutely. Councilmember Goshen?
Here.
Councilmember Hahn?
Here.
Councilmember Myers?
Here.
Councilmember Ward?
Here.
Councilmember Streetman?
Here.
Councilmember Popson?
Here.
Councilmember Anderson?
Here.
Councilmember Pierce? Mayor Pounds?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Next item is citizen comments.
Mr. Klaus?
Al Klaus, 3 Grand Pavilion, meeting number 21 since 4/13/22 regarding noise ordinance and nuisance. Requesting for the 15th time to provide us written assurances regarding enforcement of section 925BC. The amplified music from the Sweetgrass has resulted into a nuisance which has been perpetrated by the city as a result of not enforcing the ordinance. Public record. The Ethics Commission has denied our complaint, resulting in Mrs. Anderson being cleared of our conflict of interest allegation. We respectfully wish her well and look forward to a continued spirited debate regarding our seasoned abuses by the resort and consistent lack of enforcement. Congratulations. Agenda item number 6, vision statement. Respectfully, we request an action be placed which states, excluding residents which are located in proximity to the Sweetgrass Inn. August 23 livability statistics would be page 5 in your packet. Noise, 17 complaints, 0 citations. What does that tell you? Proposal, Back to the Future, May 22, 2018. The video all of you have seen. The video is on file with the IOP archives. Mr. Frank Fredericks, resort manager, described and represented to City Council the events and locations which would be held at the new proposed hotel. All musical events would be held inside the facility, not outside. Mr. Fredericks committed the hotel would comply with IOP noise ordinance, which is the same ordinance in effect today. City Council relied on the above comments and commitments by Mr. Fredericks in granting approval of the resort's new hotel. In detail, May 22, 2018 will be our baseline. The commitments made by the resort, Mr. Fredericks, will be memorialized. I would think the Low Boys and Mr. Dart would want to honor commitments made by their organization in an effort to acquire approval of their hotel. The city relied on their comments to approve the Sweetgrass Inn. Our residential neighborhood does not deserve to have decibels dictate our livability. If we tell you we are disturbed, then we are disturbed. If we need to execute affidavits, we will. Charleston and Folly Beach are not governed by decibels. Keep in mind, the Empire has had over 14 months to perform a sound abatement study.
Mr. Klaus?
Does this tell you anything? Love those cicadas. Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Next item is special presentations, tourism management and community enrichment plan. We have been talking about this for a number of months in partnership and conjunction with Explore Charleston.
It's necessary. I did nothing wrong.
Yeah. So tonight with us, we have David McNair from the McNair Group. David, thanks for joining us. In your packet, you've got some information on this. You were provided a sample survey as well today. David's going to come and just give us the highlights. We're going to kick this off this fall. So we're excited about doing this. So David, thank you for joining us tonight. And David worked with the city of Charleston on their plan, and just looking forward to him helping our community move forward as well.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'd like to do is just run through a little bit of background, let you know the type of
Mr.
experience
McNair,
we have. Yeah.
could you just move closer to the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
He's got a
I might
lapel.
up here if you like, if
Okay.
that makes a difference, but
got a wireless one on.
Okay,
If
thank
that
you.
works okay.
I just want to make sure we could hear the YouTube could pick you up.
Just to make you aware of the experience we have in this area, what the key objectives that we hope to be accomplished. I really like to begin these with just answering a simple question of why. Why would you embark on such a thing? What do you hope to get out of it? Why would you entrust McNair Group to do such a thing? And then to talk a little bit about the structure and the timeline, to give you an idea of what lies ahead. I often put up this slide just as a bit of background, which I sometimes say maybe looking at the Latin makes me seem a little bit smarter. But what this is known as historically is the hope of a saint. And it basically says, in critical things may we have unity. In important things, the freedom of diversity and other input. But in all things, care, which is respect, generosity, and those things. And it's just a platform by which we often operate on these. When we look at community enrichment, we look at livability plans, these are things that people with very different perspectives come to the table. You have people whose livelihoods are based on it. You have people whose residential livability is why they chose it. We have natural environment to protect and preserve, and yet we have development, which continues. So it's how do we bring everybody together and end up with a pathway that all feel good about. It's notable that yesterday was the 22nd anniversary, I think, of looking at 9/11. And I've often used it as a model when the towers went down. I was a resident in New York for 7.5 years before, as I say, coming home. But when they looked at it as a model, they knew that there were a lot of diverse opinions coming to the table. You had to certainly respect the hallowed ground that it was. It was the resting place for a lot of victims. You had people that wanted to rebuild the towers and look back at what that would do. So the I guess, way that they moved forward was agreeing that expediency was not what was important. It was good planning and thoughtful planning. And I think that's what brings this together. So when we look at the purpose for something like an enrichment plan, it's really to learn what are the perceptions, both the areas of support and the areas of concern, that all of the stakeholders around us have. What are the priorities? Are we gaining further insights? And then we can really begin to integrate the planning and the strategic planning as one, having really done good, what I could just call discovery through the process. The word that I put forth for most people that come to the table in community engagement is stewardship. Because I think we all have different roles, whether it's a business owner, a resident, somebody on town council. But it really gets back to we have stewardship responsibilities to protect something that's considered very much worth caring for the period of time we're in a role to be there and care for it. And I think it plays a strong part of everything that we do. I want to share with you just a little bit of the experience, not hopefully bore you with it, but of the community engagements that we've done. We've done them with other municipalities and towns. We helped when Mayor Riley and the Historic Preservation Society first came and asked if we would engage in the Charleston Livability Plan. And that was quite a large engagement, and it ended up with 5 major goalposts that we all worked around and brought the stakeholders together to really develop that plan, which has stood the test of time and led to a lot of great things in that environment. In a very different setting with Volvo, when Volvo first came to town, they contacted us and said, you know, we don't know South Carolina, but we're going to make a huge impact when we land here. And we would like to engage the community in both understanding who we are, what we're trying to achieve, and hearing from them. What would they like from us, and how could we be a good neighbor? And out of that, we picked off 33, I think, community engagement sessions, often in large forums. This is a picture at Cane Bay High School, where we led, and at most of our forums in libraries, we have in fire stations, in schools, we literally would have up to 200 and 300 people that would attend these to learn what was the impact of all the going to mean for us as a community, and how can we work together to achieve the goals. And it's just literally 6 years later, then it's still active. We still do community engagement with Volvo, but we measure the success of what we're doing. When we first started, we asked people about how pleased you be to have Volvo as a neighbor in the community. And it was interesting to see the data that was coming back. So we use a lot of polling and data in the process of what we do. I think it's part of what makes us different. We'll use live polling and hear from people right at the moment, what are the issues that they have concerns about, and it lets the dialogue be a little bit Another example, we work with a lot of education. We work with Port Cal, Ashley Hall. We work with their community engagement. We work with their faculty engagement, their parent engagement. And we've done a similar program recently with Clemson and their Bold New Strategic Plan for engaging people and how do they see Clemson coming forward. This shot is just the type of thing to show you examples of how we begin to engage communities. We'll often have them pull in just from their cell phone. And in Clemson, we say, for example, if you were going to give one word, what makes Clemson Clemson to you? And they would just write in these words in the forms of word cloud of those things that are important to them. And you can see the larger the word, the more responses that it had in family and excellence and spirit and experiences and athletics and innovation all started to pop out as the really large words that people center around. We also use polling where they can answer questions like, what's the thing that's capturing your heart right now about what's most important going on in Clemson? And you can see the things that clearly 2-to-1 was ensuring the student experience and the number one student experience in the country, which is what they're after. They don't even want to be number one in athletics, they want to be number one in student experience. So all to say, the methods that go into this are quite varied. What we recommend is that we start with a survey that can be a quantifiable survey tool to get thousands of input from your residents and from your businesses to find out how are people feeling about the most important issues. So what's in your packet is a draft example of what we're proposing be the start of the process for discovery. So it really hits on the major things that are both strategically important to the island, but also receiving most of the buzz, if you will. And through that, we'll start to really center on where are people's attitudes and perspectives about these key items. From there, we often go into large listening sessions. And for example, we did this recently with Kiowa. We've actually done it over the last 5 years with Kiowa. We'll bring in 200 plus residents at a time. We'll use polling features to find out where are they on particular issues. And when you see polarization, meaning you see that there's a pocket for, a pocket against, that's what we're doing the discussion on. If everyone's feeling pretty good about the status of where things are and they have faith that we're doing a good job in that area, then we leave those off the plate and we really center on the things, what are polarizing the community, where is it that they're not agreeing on direction. And that all helps lead us into the potential of smaller, deep dive, very special focus groups that help us go in for a business concern or an environmental concern. It might bring smaller experts to the table and really dig deep to help us with the planning. But sometimes those focus groups aren't needed. We already have the information, the resources, and you go right into the planning of the livability plan from the discovery session of what we can gain. So the timeline is to start with this survey that was the quantifiable draft survey that's in your packets. Put it out this fall. We'll get the results from that to share back, and from there decide what kind of listening sessions might we need. Would we need focus groups? But I'm thinking here, really, the other large listening sessions could be done in the latter part of this year, and we really begin to integrate some good thoughtful planning into the beginning of next year. So that's just a headshot of the community enrichment survey that we're looking at. It's all online so that somebody can just go in and answer. We try to make it really easy through promotion with QR codes that people can just see it, pop it, and answer. We work hard to keep these surveys under 10 minutes for anybody to answer so that you can really raise the rate in which people are responding. But you also want thoughtful answers. So to do anything less than 5 to 7 minutes really isn't going to garner the kind of rich data that you're going to want to move forward with. So with that, I just want to give you an overview of the process and kind of the involvement that we've had with it, and hopefully see your support for it. And our goal would be to move forward in the fall with this survey and start really gathering the data around key issues.
Rusty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the presentation, Mr. McNair. A couple of things that I had here, because the survey, and I've read a couple of times, the tourism advisory or management plan that you all helped put together down there. It looks like it was a much larger group than what you're envisioning for Isle of Palms, obviously.
Absolutely, yes.
And you also had a tourism advisory committee, which must have had, I don't know, 30 to 40 people on it. And a number of them don't live in the city of Charleston.
Right.
They were advisors, or they were consultants, but they were part of the group, you know.
Right.
And a lot of them related to the tourism industry. So I guess that was my first question. Yeah, I think you probably look at this being one that, because we're a smaller barrier island, less residents, that we can sort of get to it and pinpoint things a little more succinctly and quickly.
Absolutely. That was more than a year-long process.
Uh-huh.
As you mentioned, it was 5 stakeholder groups, each with about 30 members on it,
Mhm.
all coordinating, planning, that came together in one plan.
Yeah.
It was levels.
And I also saw the survey that you had for Charleston was pretty close to what you're recommending here too, a brief survey. And that's where you started, survey, and then developed, advisory committee, later on focus group, listening sessions and that sort of thing. So I like that idea. I did have a couple of things that we were asked when we got this earlier today, that if we saw something that just sort of jumped off the page for us, or we would like to see or recommend. As a barrier island, we have full-time residents, we have people who own homes on the island, second homeowners, business owners. I didn't see anything on this survey that might help us, other than the chance to make comments, that would help us identify maybe absentee second homeowners on the island.
I believe in the demographics, we did break that if you're a part-time resident
Uh-huh,
versus a
yeah,
full-time resident.
right.
So we could see their perspective separately, but that's one of the reasons we love to bring a draft forward. If there are areas that really should be honed in on, or we might rephrase them to identify with how people would see themselves best in the survey, then we certainly want to do that.
And the last question I have, I let everybody else weigh in, but how would this be distributed? You mentioned residents and you mentioned business owners. How wide is this distribution, would you envision here? Would it capture people from all around the low country, or just strictly residents and people who are associated with the island, and also the business owners?
Right. So we would like to be very pointed with you're a resident, full or part-time on the island, or you are a business owner on the island. We're also wanting, if somebody is a resident and they work at a business, they may not be a business owner, but they work and live on the island, we would like to break that down as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Jan?
Thank you. I think this is a wonderful idea, and I'm looking forward to this. How, is this ready, this questionnaire, is it ready to go out, or are you going to be refining it a little bit more?
So I would say we would like to refine it a little bit more. We love to
Okay.
get any of the input that any of you see in it. We're also working with the town staff to just see if there are any areas of it that we have missed. Obviously, when you go out with a survey, the last thing you want to do is get thousands of responses and saying, I wish we'd asked this. But at the same time, we want to keep it from building and building and building.
Yeah.
Because the minute you cross into 12, 14 minutes, you just see a drop off.
Yeah.
Like, people really want to be under 10.
Well, I've done surveys in my job too, and,
Yeah.
I mean, the first 5 questions you'll get answered. The rest of them you may or may not.
They flow through. And it really has to do with how important is that issue to them. So when they see that there is a section, and we try to break it down into really 5 key sections, and I see a section on environmental, I'm there. I want to go to it because that's going to be really important. So you'll
Okay.
see that. Piece answer.
Following up on what Rusty was getting at, we've had issues where we might have people off-island that are neither residents, non-residents, residents or business owners here. How do we know that the people that are answering the questionnaire, it's not somebody from Kentucky that just happened to cross the questionnaire, or even, let's just say for one of our issues, a realtor group that decides they're just going to answer the questionnaire as often as they can to skew the data.
Right.
How do you know the data is going to accurately represent the groups that we want represented?
Truthfully, you don't. But what I would give you comfort with is when you get thousands of responses, which I would expect that we would get in that level, the number of responses it would take to sway, because we're not using this as an accounting project, like you want to get down to the penny. We're using it for direction and perspectives and feelings and important issues. It would take an awful lot of input for for somebody to sit there and go over and over and over, and they have to do from different devices, which means they keep out a different device. You really don't see that in general public surveying, that somebody takes that energy sway. But to say, can we prevent it? No, because it's a public survey.
I mean, we've had some unofficial, more casual surveys that have come out recently. And the biggest question is always, who are these people that are answering it? Because there's no identifier whatsoever. So I would urge that you find some way to help us with that, because I guess you do you have a place for non-residents? I mean, they're not going to identify as
Right.
non-residents.
They would have to just be inaccurate and claim that they're a resident or a business owner in the area. The best thing is how we promote the survey should be through channels that go directly to our residents and our business owners. Will that get in the hands of other people that if they want to try and load it? Yes. I mean, I cannot say that could be prevented from it. We can limit the devices, so one survey per device, which really helps restrict people from finding another device to do it. But it would have to be a pretty well-orchestrated, large campaign, which I really don't know that people have the energy for.
Well, we have one right now that's on our plate, so that's where all these questions are coming from. I mean, we've got a referendum on our November ballot for short-term rentals, and the Realtor organization has really, it's important to them as it is to us. And we are not that large a community. So I really would hope that there's some way we can identify that we don't have a large corporate group, like,
Inordinately swaying the data.
yeah.
I
just-
think to that concern, maybe the focus groups, the listening sessions, or other mechanisms that we can
I mean, the survey is
collect
just one
data.
piece.
Yeah.
Survey is just one
Yeah.
piece.
And I would say, when you get into listening sessions, you can have people register for them and put their addresses down and that sort of thing, which really can help with that as well. And their eyeballs on it. You know some of these people. And I just think it could help with that.
Maybe this time we can get addresses for people that come to our meetings, okay?
And David, what's I didn't see on your timeline, the steering committee formation, what's your thinking around that, or when we would need to employ that?
I think if we can be putting the steering committee together while we're deploying the survey, so sometime around, I would say, early to, mid to late October, to have that in place would be helpful. I think when the results come in, we would like a good steering committee to look at that and review those results.
Gotcha.
To finish up, we only have, you're probably only going to get 2,000 responses at the most from us. So it's not a huge database.
That's actually would be really significant if we got it. To give you an idea
Right.
of projections and validity standards, if we get across the entire United States, you can have a 90% confidence level with about 450 responses. So when we start to see 1,000 roll in for a community like this, it's really high validity in terms of the direction that it's provided.
Okay,
All that being said, if we don't have a specialty group,
okay. And
I'd get some surveys.
one other thing that, just to let you know, is the Wild Dunes Community Association just did a survey of their area of the island. And that information is also available, which would be a good check for ours
Yes,
as
it
well.
would. Thank you.
So I can get that for you at the appropriate time when you want to. The other thing is, I apologize, I didn't get this until today, and I had a very busy day, so I have not had a chance to review it, but I will rather than spend time here, I'll mark it up and give it to Desiree.
That's going to be my suggestion. We easily have a week or two for you all to give it a good look. Think
Okay.
about what you'd like to see and feed that information back to the town staff, and then we'll ensure that it's appropriate.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, that we get some good information out of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Desiree, anything else?
No.
From you? David, thank you.
Did you say that you can or you do limit it to one device, the
We
survey?
do.
Oh, you do?
Can, it is the potential, and we do recommend that.
Okay, I wasn't, because I heard that both ways, so
Yeah.
I think we should do
Want
that.
to limit it to
Yeah.
every response can have one device come from that. Somebody wants to go to a computer, to an iPad, to a cell phone.
Mayor, I do have a follow-up question, and maybe, David, if you can speak to your recommendations on developing the steering committee and what members of the community should be included there? I know you've dealt with committees that are pretty large. What size group do you recommend, and what kind of composition do you recommend, so that we start thinking about what those folks could be?
Sure. I would give general guidance of around a dozen to target with the steering committee. You'll probably not get every present for meetings. So to have somewhere in the 7 to 10 range attending meetings and talking, we definitely want diverse representation on that. So it would be nice to have residents that represent newer residents to long-term residents. It'd be nice to have business owners on it. It would be nice to have people whose livelihood is based on tourism on it, and those that are looking to balance the tourism. So it's really knowing the community and really inviting people that are active, responsible, that would have good input. Again, it's back to stewardship. So you just want to have that kind of blend on your committee.
David, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Appreciate the help already.
You
Looking
bet.
forward to it, yeah. Next item is dashboard of city operations and the short-term rental report. This was in your packet. Desiree, you want to take us through that, please?
Yes. So just a reminder for the dashboard, when we look at revenues and expenses, we're looking at all funds, but on a fiscal year basis. So we're only looking at the first 2 months of the fiscal year. Everything else, we're tracking calendar year to date. So that's just wanted to make that point. And to that effect, you can see revenues and budgeted revenues compared to actual, so very little compared to where we will be at the end of the fiscal year. So not much to report on that. And I did want to make a point that property taxes, as you all know, is their largest source of revenue. Tax bills have not gone out yet, so we'll be getting those revenues end of the year in January. So that's why you'll see that line. It just shows budgeted. There's no activity on actual revenues received. Personnel vacancies, we have, as of August, we had 1 police officer. We have now 2 police officer vacancies and a communications specialist. We do have 3 candidates that are in process, so we are hoping that we'll fill those vacancies pretty quick. We have 4 paramedics in the fire department and 1 training chief. There are conducting interviews as we go along, so that process is moving well. And 1 CDL driver in the Public Works Department, which we have issued an offer, and he will be starting next week. So that's just an update on that. Upcoming community events, we have a lot of events and programs and activities coming up the next month or two. Farmers Market next Thursday. Coffee with Mayor at the end of the month on the 29th. And then October is a very busy month for our staff. We have the National Night Out on the 3rd. We have the Community Wellness Fair, which is available to the entire community as well as the staff on the 6th. We have the Connector Run on October 7th, Ghostly Tide Tales, and the IOP Public Safety Open House on the 20th. And also wanted to remind City Council about the Employee Appreciation event that's happening on the September 22nd at the Exchange Club at noon. So please, if you can stop by and say hi to our employees, that would be very appreciated. We'll have lunch and some games. Should be a lot of fun. On the other activities that we track every month, police department charges and actions were ahead for calls for service compared to the past 2 years. We're ahead of traffic stops compared to 22 and 2021, and parking citations were not quite as high as we were in 2021, but we are tracking higher than last year. Fire department calls, you received the report for August. That report does not include auto aid calls for the month. Well, we have not gotten that information yet, but according to Chief Oliverius, we should be looking at numbers very similar to July, which you received last year.
Desiree?
Yes?
Could we get the chief to speak to that, to the auto aid issue, just because it's such a huge spike? So our equipment's running a whole lot more than it used to.
Certainly, we can have him come over. I'll just say that that number includes the calls that are canceled en route. So it means that they were either canceled after they've deployed the truck, before they get to the connector, or canceled before they leave the station. But Chief, anything to add? You can come here, Chief.
And Chief, just so that you understand what I'm asking, I've had a number of people talk to me about, well, these are very expensive trucks and equipment, and if we're cranking them up and running them down the road, turn around, coming back, we're just wearing them out and burning up tires and gas, and why are we doing all that? And so tell me why we're doing all that.
Sure. Well, while we're doing all that is to meet national standards through NFPA for our response for those building fires and those high risk, time-sensitive emergencies. And for us, we've seen a lot of benefit. To Ms. Fregoso's point, we have seen, what we have seen is our call volume has increased, obviously. The majority of those, when we go into other areas outside of Isle of Palms, we're seeing that we're canceled en route, or we send one unit, maybe 2 units at the most. We'll send a battalion chief, sometimes by themselves, sometimes we'll send a ladder truck, sometimes we'll send the ladder truck and the battalion. When we do that, we still have the squad in service here and engine 1002. And typically it's for a very short time. What we see with Mount Pleasant and City of Charleston and North Charleston, they come over here less frequent, but when they do, they send more apparatus. So for example, a fire alarm call in Mount Pleasant, we may send just the battalion chief. A fire alarm call here, we may get 2 Mount Pleasant resources. If it's a building fire, we will get, 4, maybe 5, sometimes 6 Mount Pleasant or City of Charleston resources coming, especially if it's a commercial. So we find that we go over there more. We don't go as far. When we receive aid, we receive it in spades. And so when we look at the numbers between apparatus, how we share, even though we go over there more, for their calls here, they send a lot more. And so that's been even. As far as the tires, we haven't noticed compared year over year to last year, we are not having to replace tires at a higher rate. We're definitely tracking that, monitoring that through Safe Industries. And fuel also has been negligible. And actually for us, for the running of the trucks, what is more damaging is when the truck is idling for the idle time, but it's actually very healthy for the truck to get it up and move it down the road, especially with the high temperature exhaust systems with the DEF fluid and that kinds of thing. So when we get it moving down the connector, it's actually really great. And so we actually do that. We exercise our trucks and take them to all those that are reserve apparatus to blow out everything in the exhaust
Take
system.
them out to a nice pasture out in the hot dog.
Right.
Run around.
Yeah, no offense, but they're down Highway 17. We take it down Highway 17 to the Mount Pleasant Fire Department Training Facility on Seawee Road, and we loop around there. And we found that gets our vehicle up to the temperature where everything can be burned off as per it is designed through the new exhaust systems. So great question, and we have seen a definite benefit. And in fact, we've had multiple calls to where we've had multiple calls at one time. In fact, we had a building fire, and we had a teenager at the public safety building that rode up on a golf cart. They had a traumatic injury to the chest. And so what happened is the Mount Pleasant Battalion Chief, who was responding to the potential building fire in Wild Dunes, he diverted a Mount Pleasant paramedic resource that was going to the building fire directly to the public safety building, and there was no lag in care. In fact, it had a higher level of care with paramedic, and then it was immediate. And then they substituted a Mount Pleasant apparatus from a further location to respond to us. And we've had a couple of those calls where that has happened, where we've had calls at the same time, and those resources from other agencies, Mount Pleasant or City of Charleston, were diverted to a higher priority call.
Thank you. And one other thing, if you could speak to.
Sure.
Is we have a number of multi-story, multifamily buildings on the island. And is that also a reason that auto aid makes sense for us? Because if you have a fire on floor 8 or 9 of a building, it sucks up a whole lot more resources, I would assume. I'd ask like you to talk about that than does a single-family resident fire. And therefore, the whole island would need to be protected, I would assume, if we suck up all our resources putting out a fire in a multifamily structure.
Correct, absolutely. You're exactly right. The bigger the box, the bigger the fire that could be in that box. And fire has not changed, but what is burning has changed. So a lot of petroleum-based products, plastics, and they give off a lot of fuel-rich smoke, and it's very noxious. And so the bigger the box, the larger potential that you have, and the faster you need to get there. And if it's not protected with fire sprinklers, it's even more important. But, smoke is the dangerous piece of the fire, the fire emergency. For us, fire is very important to put out, but the smoke that the fire causes, that can reach somebody and cause a negative effect on their health, or, they can be incapacitated very quickly. So that's why we need to get there quickly. And to your point, if you have elevated structures, absolutely. When NFPA first designed their response guidelines, their recommendations is a consensus standard, not a requirement, but a best practice that we all look to in the industry. They looked at, for a residential, a single-family home, 2,000 square feet. Well, that's kind of our old, J.C. Long homes in a way. But now we have homes that are much larger than that. And NFPA recommended, 16 people responding to a 2,000 square foot home. Well, obviously, we have strip malls here, which require a lot larger resource complement, the high rises that you mentioned, anything over multiple stories. And we have a lot of single-family homes that are 5,000 and 6,000 square feet all over the place, and even plenty more that are larger than that. And so the homes
Say
now
that
are
again, on a 2,000 square foot house, how many people?
16.
16.
You have
Just for
15
2,000.
firefighters and a battalion chief. And so right now, we have 10 people on shift, and then we'll have 12 per shift when we're fully staffed and we hire the additional firefighter paramedics. So that doesn't get us even the minimum for that 2,000 square foot. And that's where automatic aid comes in to fill that call, to make sure we have the appropriate resources. And also, the magic thing, the great thing about it is if there is like a medical call for, a fall on Carolina Boulevard, those resources can be diverted from that call that they're going to respond to another call. So that's your backfill. That's the resiliency piece that is so beautiful for us, that we've seen our citizens benefit from. And it's so valuable because it is real time, and those battalion chiefs on the call, they substitute resources just like they did here for the teenager that had the chest pain from the traumatic event to the chest.
Jan.
So, great questions.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Chief, I have a follow-up with what Councilmember Hahn was asking you about cost benefit for us of this automatic aid. When I'm looking at the statistics here, it looks like the actual automatic aid calls that we attended off-island was 23, and what automatic aid we received on-island from off-island was 82. That's a 3 to 4 to 1 cost benefit for the island. In other words, we're getting more benefit out of this than it's costing us, is what I'm seeing there. Is that correct?
So I'd have to look back at those numbers, but what we're seeing is that might not be looking at the apparatus numbers. So
Yeah.
we might go to Mount Pleasant or City of Charleston, let's say, for example, 30 times. And they may come over here 15 times. But when on those 15 occurrences, when they come over, they'll send, 70 pieces of equipment for those calls. When we go over, we'll send, we'll probably send 30. If there are 30 calls, we'll send 30 or 35 pieces of equipment. So when we look at it from that perspective, that might be the number you're looking at.
It's down at the bottom of your bar chart that's here, so,
Okay, yeah, I don't have that in
Okay.
front of me right now, but
thanks.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Chief. I think we talked about police, municipal court. We had a decline in the number of cases in August, but that was due to the storm. We had to reschedule a court date, so we'll see those numbers being picked up in the September numbers we see next month. Garbage and yard debris, we're tracking pretty closely to where we are, and we have been this same time past 2 years. And with Recreation Department slightly over. We're seeing a lot of registration, a lot of activity at the rec center, and I think it shows a lot of the good work and new programming that they're doing there. It's resonating with the community. So those numbers, just wanted to confirm, it includes all registrations, athletics, programs, classes, anything that requires a registration is included in that statistic. And then the last thing we wanted to report on is we've been tracking, as you all know, short-term rental license per license year. We are currently, as of September 7th, we have 1,803 rental licenses, and I'll just continue, if y'all don't mind. I'll go to the next slide. We have an increase we had 8 new short-term rental license for those homes that are taxed at the 4% rate, so primary residences. We had 179 last month. We have 187 now. 6% with 6% properties with a short-term rental license. It went up to 16. 9 more compared to where we were in August. And if y'all recall, the August report showed 9 unlicensed rentals. All of those have been addressed through enforcement and walked through the process to get a license, and those are now included in the total number. So we don't have any properties that have been identified as illegally renting without a license, which is the program that we use called Rentalscape. So we have none as of the 7th. We have 4 properties that are pending to get a license, and that's probably, they've received an invoice from our staff, our clerks, and have not yet paid. So we fully anticipate those to be included in the total numbers when they do. That's all I have.
And in the packet are all the departmental reports, so anything, any questions that haven't already been asked, Jimmy?
Just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You opened up the presentation by saying that the property taxes was the top source of revenue?
One of our, that's right. I mean, tourism funds, that's right.
License and permits?
True.
I didn't bring the whole budget with me, but the property taxes
It's
are.
one of.
Oh, yeah, it's not.
That's at least third, if fourth or more, or less.
Yes, you're
I mean,
correct.
And it's, tourism funds bring in the vast amount of money.
That is correct.
And the taxes, the licenses and permits.
That's correct.
And the parking lot is over $1.1 million.
That's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you, Desiree.
You're welcome.
And Chief, again. Next item is strategic plan, policy initiatives, and priorities. The only item under here is item E, other item for discussion of donation to the Emmanuel 9 Memorial. Just quick background and how this has gotten onto our agenda. We were approached by John Darby, who's the president of the Beach Company and is also the co-chair of the Emmanuel 9 Foundation Board. In your packet was a brochure that John has shared with us around what's going on with the memorial, the overview of it, the layout of it, the conceptual design of it. You could see in the brochure, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but that the memorial will be a place of contemplation, communion, and conversation, a catalyst for creating a culture where racism and violence exist no more. Also, that the memorial design reflects a powerful and inspiring way in which Emmanuel 9 family members relied on the bedrock of their faith to reverse the spread of hate with a message of unyielding love and forgiveness. David showed the Ground Zero Memorial. Same designer for Ground Zero has designed the Mother Emmanuel 9 Memorial Gardens and area. So from my viewpoint, we've been very fortunate as a city to be in an exceptional spot from a revenue standpoint, from a reserve standpoint. I think it'd be a great gesture on our part to contribute something to this cause and being a part of the larger Lowcountry community. Just by way of background too and information, other groups have given pretty significant amounts. City of Charleston gave $4 million to this cause. The state gave $4 million. Charleston County has given $1 million. City of North Charleston gave $250,000, and the town of Mount Pleasant gave $250,000. So just to give you some insight to what's going on around the community. So this obviously would be an unbudgeted item for us. So I would suggest we would pay it out of one of two places if we agree that this is something worthy of contributing to, either out of our interest income, which will roughly be a little bit over $2 million this year, just on our reserves, or we're getting ready to have a conversation probably next month on what we're going to do with our fiscal '23 surplus, which is about $1.2 million or $1.3 million. And you remember, we have those conversations, how much goes to beach preservation or disaster recovery or stays in the general fund. So I think either one of those spots would be reasonable for us to take it out and make some type of a contribution. So wanted to introduce it here. Obviously, we're not voting on anything tonight, but we would vote on it at the end of the month at our council meeting. But just wanted to get any reactions or comments or questions that we might could answer that weren't in the brochure that Mr. Darby had presented to us. Jimmy?
Quick statement, I think it's a worthy cause, and we should give it careful consideration with a material donation.
Blair?
I would like some kind of a feel for how much we're talking about. If we did a pro rata based upon Mount Pleasant at 100,000 population, giving it $250,000, we're at about 5% of their population, which would put us at 12,500. Pro rata, that makes sense, but I don't know if $12,500 makes sense as far as what we should donate, so.
And Blair, and I think that's the magic question. One, do we want to do it? And two, what's the amount? Before we had met with Mr. Darby and got what other communities were doing, I probably had that kind of number in my head, somewhere between 10 and 15, to be quite honest with you. Not to react to peer pressure, but I would, and again, given where the city sits from a financial standpoint, I would love to see us do something in like the $50,000 range personally, but that's just, in my head, just for reaction. Jan?
I think this is a very worthy cause, and I think it's very much that we need as a city to support the Mother Emanuel Memorial. And I'm also thinking of other past contributions that we have made to other similar organizations. For instance, a $30,000 donation to the Veterans of Foreign War for their elevator. I think we could certainly find $50,000 at least for this kind of memorial donation.
Rusty?
Thank you. I'm thinking a larger number than 50 myself. I think that we've been blessed on this island. We have the resources to do it. This was a tragedy that struck all of us deeply in this community and across the nation and around the world. So I would hope that we look at this between now and the time that we meet at council meeting. And, for me, I mean, $50,000 would be the minimum starting point, in my opinion. So I could see us going $100,000 easily myself.
Would this potentially qualify under any ATAX funding, as it's visitors and draws visitors to the memorial here?
I mean, I think, I think you definitely could connect that dot. Again, to me, this is just my view. How we have weathered the storm, so to speak, in the last 5 years from a financial aspect. I think the city ought to step up and do it personally from a contribution standpoint. But again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, one final point. We have a lot, I've never seen our cash balance as high as it is, although we must keep in mind that much of it is restricted, and we'll be going over that later. But if you just take cash from August 31st last year to August 31st this year, August 31st last year, a little over 32 million. This year's 41 million. So the city's in good financial shape, and that is mostly from smart budgeting by Debbie Suggs and Desiree and Douglas. So the assets are there, although it's restricted. A lot of it is. And that's it.
Right, again,
I just want to say that I think I would like to, suggest, I'm not sure this will fly or not, but with consideration with ATAX money, that it be in the general fund, general ATAX, what is it, 65, 70%, that this would create a lot of goodwill for us within the larger community and the visiting public. And so if we look at it that way, we may be able to even justify it with that pot of money as well. But
Yeah.
I definitely support this heartily.
Yeah, I don't, where we pay, I don't think it's the question. I mean, I think
Okay.
there are plenty of buckets that we can pay this from. It's just really an amount. So we'll have this on the item, on the agenda for our council meeting at the end of the month.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item is financial review. Deborah, go solo. Spread those wings. Go ahead.
Wings are being spread. Good evening, council, mayor, thank you. I want to begin with the overall total revenue for all funds. We are, total revenues of all funds is 9% of budget, as well as expenses are tracking at the same rate. For our general fund, we are, the general fund is 8% of budget, which makes sense for the first 2 months. And as Desiree said, the property taxes are normally collected starting in November, because the bills go out in October. The majority of the funds coming in after the first of the year. So we'll see that number increase later on, early part of next year. Our parking revenue is about 45% of the total revenue received, and court and interest is about 20% of the revenues received. Expenses are kind of tracking with the 16% targeted number for the budget, with BSOs being a little bit over the budget number for the 2 months, but that is because of the vote to increase the BSO number from prior year, and also to give them an incentive to stay longer. That's why that number's a little bit higher. The cash balances are continuing to increase, as Councilman Jimmy said. I want to bring your attention to the interest that we are receiving. The average percentage is 5.5, and that's an increase over last month, which was 5.42%. For August, we collected $183,000 in interest, and year-to-date, we've collected $362,000 of interest.
That's just
Fiscal.
2 months.
2 months,
What was that number again? 3 what?
$362,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the cash balances are doing very, very well. Just to note, the last item on this list is that we received the assessments from the county, and we will have a meeting, I will have a meeting with Desiree and the mayor to discuss the assessments. But at this time, there's no need to increase the millage from what the budget has proposed.
Deborah, you got to hit that hard, man.
No millage increase.
No millage increase.
And we will have the updated numbers, the reassessment information from the county at the council meeting on the 26th, because typically at that, in September, council votes to set the millage. We don't anticipate having to make any changes to what we, as Deborah indicated, from what we had in the budget. So no property tax increase.
Do you remember last time we had a millage increase?
Certainly before my time, and I've been here,
That's what I
believe it or
thought.
not, 8 years.
She's too young.
I think it's been a while. I think it only increases when there's a need to go out and get debt. And
Yeah.
I don't think it was increased even the last time debt was incurred.
No, we had an increase to the operating millage to cover the drainage
Yep.
bond issue, but our operating millage, I couldn't tell you when was the
Years
last
ago.
time.
I'm going to discuss the tourism schedules. The Muni aid tax, we still have not received any additional taxes for that fund this year. The amount that we did receive counts towards FY '23, and we're still collecting money for FY '23. Our audit fieldwork was supposed to start next week, but they pushed it back a week, so it'll start the week of the 25th. So we should be seeing something come in soon. The state accommodation tax and the aid tax pass-through, there isn't any activity.
I think, Deborah, we want to highlight the last quarterly payment from state aid tax and the county pass-through. We did not have that last month. We have received it now. So now we have a full FY '23 for both those accounts.
Yes, we talked about it a little bit. We received notice that the funds were here last month, but we didn't actually receive them until August. So they're actually, like Desiree said, they're on the schedule for a full year. As well as the hospitality tax, we received everything for FY '23. We are 1 month into FY '24 with $192,906.
Which is a record number.
It's a record.
I think you can see that.
Incredible.
In that such schedule. People are eating and drinking.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot.
Our beach preservation, there isn't any activity that we can recognize for FY '24. The number that's there has been counted towards FY '23. And for our local option sales tax, we completed a full year at $1.1 million, and there isn't any activity for FY '24. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Desiree, before you hit, real quick, Jimmy, to your question on millage. In 1998, our operating millage was 34.2,
Now it's
19.1.
19.1. How much again? 30 what?
34.2 in
So it has dropped.
1998.
I don't know, that's almost 50%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little fuzzy math as Deborah is learning. Once you have the reevaluation and CPI and
Assessment.
the assessment, it's a
All
little
that, yeah.
wonky, but baseline from a millage rate.
Right, it's been
So,
flatlined for a long
yeah.
time.
Deborah, thank you. Next item, procurement, discussion of recommendation of award of a contract to air cleaning specialist in the amount of $97,775 for the installation of direct source vehicle apparatus exhaust capture systems at both fire stations. You can see our budgeted number was right at $200,000, so at this point, this is significantly under. Desiree, anything to add
No,
there?
we received 2 bids for that project. We had fire department evaluate them, and they're making a recommendation to one of the 2 companies that submitted a bid for $97,775.
And what's the timing on installation? I know we have to approve it at the end of the month, but any idea of the timing of installation? So sometime this fall?
Yes, I think definitely before the end of the year, we should have that installed.
Great, thank you. Item B, discussion of recommendation of award of a sole source contract to Coastal Science and Engineering for the following projects. You can see we have 3 different scopes, and the amounts are listed there. Our fiscal 24 budget has an amount of $255,000 for scope A and B. So C is new information since we obviously did the budget with the Army Corps project. So Desiree, anything to add here?
I do want to say that it should not say sour.
You know what you mean.
I know I intended to edit it,
You know what
and
it
I guess
was.
I didn't, but it is a sole source contract. Well, hopefully, the way we've been, and I know we've been anticipating the CSC proposal for a couple months. They were a bit delayed in getting it to us, so we have it now. I had requested that they separate the different activities so that we know exactly what kind of activity, how how much each activity costs, but just to give you all a reminder, I think the proposal spells it out pretty nicely, but for those that have not looked at the proposal, Scope A involves the beginning the permitting, the surveying, and the coordination associated with a sand recycling shoal management project. We have done two in the past, one in 2012 and 2014, and essentially the concept, 2014 and 2012, yes. The concept is to borrow sand from areas along the north end that are accretional and addressing hotspot erosional areas. And we have seen that when we do those types of projects, it extends the life of the larger projects, and hopefully would extend the life of the recently completed, I say recently, but in 2019, 2018, 2019, when we completed the large project in on the north end where we dredged and placed over 1 million cubic yards of sand. So in anticipation of, and already seeing some erosional areas, the recommendation is to do the smaller project, which would, again, be recycling sand. The second scope, it's a little bit broader. It talks about beginning the coordination and the process to start the permitting for larger offshore projects on both the north end and the south end. For the north end, it will require us to do additional surveying and coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office. I think I've talked about this before, how in the last project, historic resources were found in the area that we had identified as our borrow area with beach-compatible sand. At the time, we were able to harvest sand from a different location and not disturb the historic area, but we do know that we will have a need to harvest sand from that location in the future because we know it has a good amount of beach-compatible sand. So in order for us to be allowed by the State Historic Preservation Office to harvest sand there, additional surveying is necessary, and potential additional work associated with an educational component to memorialize that historic resting place of the Second Stone Fleet. So that is included in Scope B. In addition to that, it will start the process to identify beach-compatible borrow areas for the south end. I'll talk a little bit about the Army Corps project, but we do have a need to identify offshore sources. The cost of a large offshore project, it depends a lot on the proximity of where the borrow borrow area is close to the project, and it is not feasible for us to use borrow areas from the north end to replenish and renourish the south end. So that is included in Scope B. And then Scope C, and just to going back to Scope A and B, those were anticipated in the budget. Scope C is this beneficial use project that we have been approached by the Corps earlier this summer, and provides the city a unique opportunity to, at essentially no cost, have almost 500,000 cubic yards of sand placed on the south end of the island. The scope of the core project does not include moving any of that sand and restoring the dune and moving that sand to the dry sand area. And it is being recommended that the city pursue that in coordination with the Corps and under their permit and their authorization. So the third scope of the project would include having CSC do the necessary coordination and construction administration of that process. And just as an update, I am meeting with the Corps early next week to get more details about the design of the project and timing, and in anticipation of us working with the property owners that are going to be along that project area so that we can begin the process of securing temporary easements from them. And we'll have a public meeting, invite all those property owners to do that, but the first step is get the Corps, to sit down with the Corps. So we're doing that, and I'll have more details for you all after that.
Just
John.
Okay. Just one thing, for the benefit of the listening public, we had discussed why we did not put these projects to bid. And can you just repeat that for us, please?
Well, so the city has, so our procurement code and the city's code of ordinances, we have our procurement code that exempts professional services from going through the procurement process. That's not to say that the city can make a decision. We think that the best thing for us to do is to issue a request for proposal or issue a request for bids. And we typically are on that side. If you look at the pages of requests for proposals and bids, I mean, we bid everything we can out, which is a lot of work for us, but I think it's the right thing to do. In this case, the city has had a long-standing relationship with Coastal Science and Engineering. We have not had any issues with them. They're very knowledgeable of our beach. They've been monitoring and working with the city since 2007. In 2019, though, we did bid out a project for the island-wide beach monitoring. So we have them conduct a full assessment of the beach every year, and that has been very helpful. But we did bid that out in 2019, and I recall another proposer submitting a bid. We had no experience with them, and Coastal Science and Engineering came in almost half of what the other proposer did. So we have several sections in our procurement code that would justify exempting this contract from being going through the competitive bidding process. That's not to say that the city can decide to do that if we think it's the right thing to do. But it is, I think, an advantage when we have relationships with contractors like this that we don't necessarily have to.
John.
Yeah, I had a similar question around that. That question has come up, and I think it warrants a little bit of discussion around it. I think you're right. In certain cases, I think it does, there are cases where you would go with a contractor that you're comfortable with and served us well and is very knowledgeable. I think in other cases that is more generic, it serves the city best when there's alternative suppliers of that service or of those goods to go out and make sure that we're testing the pricing on it through a bid or RFP process. So I question on some of these, I mean, so going out and finding compatible sand seems like a fairly generic task, and one that could say, hey, we want to get the best price to be able to get that service, so may warrant it. The others that are more specific, like shoal management and maybe understanding the history around that, may be best served by someone that knows that and has been monitoring that for many years. So I question, whether you just paint it all with the same brush, or we really look at these and see how do we get the best value for the city on that. So I am questioning a couple of those. I guess the third one, C, though, I'm not so sure that we're premature, because I don't think that the Corps has even given us what their proposal or plan is yet for us to have anybody, whether it's Coastal Science or anybody else, go and give a proposal on how to do our part of it. I think we need to wait at least until we understand what the core scope of work is and what they make a proposal to us. And if you're meeting with them next week, that's great, maybe we get that. But we should wait until we understand what their scope is before we start proposing what our scope is.
So I do want to say that the Army Corps of Engineers has had multiple conversations and meetings with Stephen Trainham directly.
At CSE.
Yes, at CSC on the beneficial use project. So they have been meeting with the Corps on a more technical level, helping design the project. So while we don't have a written proposal from the Corps just yet, Stephen is very much familiar with what the details of that plan are and what the opportunities are for us to take advantage of that opportunity and expand and restore and strengthen the dune far along the areas that we've extending it from the areas that we've done it so far on an emergency basis. So I think Stephen has a unique perspective on the work that the Army Corps is planning on doing. We'll have more they haven't really included us. We're not technical experts when it comes to beach. But they have been meeting with the engineers representing Sullivan's Island for about over a month now. But we'll know more next week, and maybe we
Well,
can.
what's the scope of their C work? It's $83,000, but what are they going to give us at the end of that 83? What are they going to deliver to us?
They're not, we're getting a project that is designed that far exceeds just placement of sand by the Corps along the inshore areas. They would be administering, once we select a contractor, they would help us select a contractor to do that work, establish the limits and the specifications of that additional work that above and beyond what the Corps is going to do, and administer that contract, which is very similar to what they're doing with this emergency project.
And similar to what we've done at Marina with ATM.
That's
kind of
right.
Construction oversight or management oversight. And I guess Desiree, John, sorry to interrupt, but just real quick, make sure there's a point of clarification. I mean, the reason y'all had them break out the bid like this, I mean, if Steve never came to fruition, I mean, we're not paying anything until that ever happened. That's why you've got it broken out like this, right?
That's correct. And they're hired on a fee basis. So it's not a lump sum. If the project happens differently, that will be adjusted.
Yeah.
So it's just a time and expense
Sorry, John.
contract.
Okay.
I would just ask you to rethink if there's portions of that it can be put out for competitive bids if there's qualified other suppliers of that.
I would definitely say that scope A and C may be the most urgent, I think, that we want to get the ball rolling. B is equally as urgent, but because we are assuming we're doing the shoal management project that hopefully will extend the life of the 2018 project on the north end, and then this core project that is hopefully happening in the next few months, which will extend the life of that area. I could certainly see an opportunity for us to procure that piece, and certainly invite CSC to solicit.
I agree.
Jan, one final, and then Rusty.
Okay, I'd just like to say, I agree that we should go to bid on as many projects as we can, but as a consultant, I know it's a very small community, and when I was doing consulting, we knew who was in with the city and who wasn't, who was doing good work. The client was satisfied with them, and we wouldn't even bid on a project because we knew there was no chance we were going to get it, and rather waste $30,000 or $50,000 to propose, we would just pass it by. That being said, you need to test it periodically to make sure that that's still valid, so, and that we're getting good prices. So I was going to suggest that maybe next time that we go out to bid, but if we have an opportunity here that you think is not going to delay any of our activities,
That's
we might
right.
consider.
Sounds like we just did it in 2019.
That's
Separate
correct.
project, I know, but
Yeah.
Rusty.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Desiree, just right off the top of your head, you are Douglas. Do you know other companies that actually do this kind of work in the southeast? And in the past, if we've done some other bids, how have they responded? I know you brought up one example a while ago, but have we found, I guess what I'm asking is, have we found CSE to be very compatible and very competitive in their bids in the past?
So in 2019, we bid it out. We had two other proposers. CSC for that project came at $34,000. The next proposer was at 43 and 86, if I recall correctly. This was 5 years ago. So they were way below the other proposers.
And were we happy with the work that was done?
Yes, the
Okay.
city has had a great relationship with CSC, and we've had no issues with their work, and whether it's in a project or with the ongoing monitoring and the emergency help that they've provided. After hurricanes, we engaged them separately for sand scraping projects after Irma and Matthew. There are other coastal engineering firms out there. ATM does this work. We know of Olson and Associates that handle the work for Hilton Head. But once you have a beach community, they typically work with the same engineer for decades because they get a unique perspective on the behavior of that beach. So it is unusual to see, unless there are any issues, to see folks switching. CSC also manages the beach at Edisto.
One question, if I may. Isn't it a factor about retaining a firm like this, that they have all this historical data that would be really difficult, if not impossible, for a successor to duplicate? Is that a consideration?
That is correct, and that is why, in all likelihood, you put this out for bid, you will see it in the price from other firms. They're gonna have to do a lot of work to catch up.
Okay.
To get to the point where CSC or your consultant on a long-term project would be.
Right, thank you.
Rusty, did you have another?
Yeah, the only other final comment I was going to make basically is we've had a 16-year relationship with CSC, and they've done good work for us. I've seen them, I lived in a beachfront area for 27 years, and I used to see them out on the dunes all the time doing the measurements and that sort of thing. And I just think the relationship means a lot. They know a lot about our beach, what goes on around here, and I know we'll have more discussion about it, but I wouldn't want to see us do anything that would derail the kind of success we've had in the past with beach renourishment and just these various projects we've had in the past.
Desiree, did you have a couple other procurement items just to report out on?
Yes, but they will be included in the agenda
Council.
for council.
Okay.
Yes, and these are purchases between $10,000 and $25,000 that are budgeted. We don't have to get them approved by council, because council already approved them via the approval
We'll do
of the
that.
budget. I just have to report
Okay.
those, and they'll be listed on the agenda for.
Thank you. Last item's capital projects update. You saw on the screen, it was in your packet. Desiree's trying a new abbreviated format. How about that?
Let me know what y'all think. I think this is going to be helpful for me to track them, but I know some folks like the pictures that we attach to the projects. A lot of these are just starting, so we don't have a lot of pictures, but I will add them. And if you hate this, I can go back to the slides. Just let me know. Happy to do whatever works best. But let's give it a shot and see how we like it. So the first project we talk about is the Phase 3 drainage project. The 30th outfall project has been completed. For 36th Avenue, the work is scheduled to begin in the first week of October. We have a road closure scheduled for October 4th. Will likely be in place for about 8 weeks. That is conservative. The first road closure at 30th lasted much less than that, so we are anticipating that'll be the case, but in our communications, we'll be planning on 8 weeks. Just like we did with the road closure at 30th, we'll be sending direct mailing and letters to the folks around that area, and we'll be doing ads in the local paper and social media and informational on the website. The 41st Avenue outfall, we had a grade pre-bid meeting here with the Office of Resilience and Thomas and Hutton, who is engineering that project. There were some questions that had to be answered via an addendum, and according to the SCORE guidelines, they have to have at least a week between issuing the addendum with answers to the questions and having the bids received. So the deadline for bids was extended through the 14th. So we should be getting that by the end of this week. We know about 5 or 6 contractors that are interested, so we were hoping for a good response. And again, this is the project that the city's not paying a dime. It's all funded by the Office of Resilience. The Waterway Boulevard Multi-Use Path Elevation Project, we did have a bid out for the design, engineering, construction administration. We opened bids in mid-August, and we had 2, one from Thomas and Hutton and another another engineering firm in the area that is, we don't have any experience with. It's, I think, relatively new. So we are in the process of evaluating these two proposals with the South Carolina Emergency Management Division. They're the local agency that will be managing the FEMA funds should we be awarded the $1 million grant for the construction of this project, which we anticipate will be awarded early next year. We just have to make sure that any contracts that we award follow federal procurement guidelines. They're 37 pages, and I'm still going over, so we want to make sure that we meet all of that and be eligible for reimbursement when we receive the grant. We hope that we'll be able to make a recommendation for award at your meeting a couple weeks from today. For the Marina Public Dock and Green Space Project, ATM is about 95% complete. Heard back from both OCRM and the Corps that our permit is the next one in the line, and there are no questions and issues. So we are hoping, crossing our fingers, that we'll get it by the end of this month. And with the design being at 95% as of last week, we should be ready to go out for bidding in October. Right after getting the permits.
Desiree, quick question. This came up to me yesterday when I was, we were over at the VFW. Do we have ADA compliant restrooms planned for that area down there near the public dock?
No. The plan does not include any restrooms. The public dock project essentially is expanding the pier from where it is today to about 16 feet wide, a new enclosed area with benches and seating area, and then the 2 ADA compliant kayak and stand-up paddleboarding launches.
Well, maybe this is not the time or place, but I think I think it's something that we really should consider at some point in the future here. If you're going to have a fully AD compliant public dock, the closest restrooms are going to be over at the Marina Outpost. And I think it's something we just ought to consider. And tonight's not the night to get into that longer term discussion, but maybe we should have some conversation about it in public services.
I do recall the plan that was developed as part of the Marina redevelopment project that was placed on a referendum and ultimately failed, did include public restrooms. If I mean, I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it did. But that plan was never, was not approved and therefore not implemented.
Okay.
All right, where am I? T-Dock repairs, not a whole lot to report there. We are planning, as I've said before, to include the maintenance and repair items as part of the bid for the public dock, hoping that the same contractor will already be mobilized and can do that work at the same time. Marina dredging, we had a stakeholder meeting last month and was very well attended. And the goal of that meeting was to offer to the neighbors of the marina an opportunity to join with the city in our permitting efforts and ideally in any future construction so that we can all benefit from potential cost savings in mobilization and demobilization. We anticipate about 2 partners, maybe the Intercoastal Court Group may join the city's permitting efforts, as well as Yacht Harbor and the Dewey's Marina. So we're waiting to hear from them. They have about, I think, until next week to tell us what their plans are, whether or not they're joining. And I think that would be a good idea for them to do so. The other thing I did want to say about the dredging project is the 26 Canal Association purchased a piece of property across on the Intercoastal to serve as their spoil site, and have offered us the opportunity to use that to for us to place our sediment with, they don't call it spoils anymore, the sediment there. So that's huge. That would be a huge cost savings for the city. We would not have to go farther to dispose of the sediments that is dredged from the marina. So we're working with them to understand what kind of permit requirements we would need to do to be able to accommodate that capacity in their spoil site. So more on that. The emergency vehicle access project with the county park is being finalized by Davidson Floyd. There's some additional feedback we received from the county. We are still on track to finalizing the concepts in October. We'll be bringing that up before you all for approval, and go out for bidding in November, and hopefully construction first of the year. Very clear that we want to get this project completed before the beginning of the next busy beach season. Beach access path improvements, we haven't done a whole lot with it just yet, but we are starting on looking at surveying and design of the beach access paths that we would like to install footbridges. These are low-lying beach access paths that get flooded constantly, and people have to wade in knee-deep water or ankle-deep water after a rain. So we'll be working on that, and also identifying 2 beach access paths where we could install an ADA compliant boardwalk, very similar to the projects at 34A. With the funds that were recently approved by the state budget, we received $500,000 for ADA compliant boardwalks. So we'll be working on that this off-season. The beach maintenance, beach restoration, just a quick update on the emergency burn project down at Breach Inlet. That project got completed today between 100 and 314 Ocean. They are mobilizing to Beechwood East tomorrow. And they will be, the contractor will be using the 25th beach access path to mobilize their equipment to Beechwood East. They have looked at 3 others, and they're not wide enough to accommodate their large pieces, large apparatus.
It's a long way.
It is a long way. They will be mobilizing very early tomorrow, so hopefully before there are any crowds, and they should be done in that area in a day and a half at most. We've talked about the CSC proposal, bids for the fire department exhaust systems. We've already talked about that. City Hall renovation, we issued last month a request for qualifications from design build teams. We received responses from 2. We are scheduling a presentation of both at the next Public Services and Facilities Committee meeting, and the goal would be to have a recommendation to engage one of them in this process. The next step after a request for qualifications would be to invite one of the 2 to present a proposal that would have some numbers attached to the scope. Outdoor fitness court, Carrie and her team are working hard to procure quotes for the installation of the concrete slab where the fitness equipment is going to be installed. It's progressing well. As soon as the concrete slab is slabbed or installed? Poured. And cured.
I like slab.
They will be shipping the equipment so that it's on site and ready for installation. Certainly by the end of the year, we should have that completed. Dog park improvements, they're still working on getting pricing and potentially doing we have an RFP out for the fence replacement because it exceeds $25,000. So we should, hopefully by October, we get a recommendation for an approval of a contract. Undergrounding power lines. The next project we're working on with Dominion Energy is at 14th Avenue. Dominion Energy had hired Pike Engineering to help them. They've completed the design. We have a cost estimate, and we're meeting with them later this week to review that and talk about a construction timeline, which again would be in the off-season. And I do have an update from SCDOT. I didn't by the time we sent this out, but RK&K, the consultant that they had hired to do this work, has completed the development of the concepts, and They're coming over to meet with me and some of the rest of my staff to review it before presenting it to City Council, second week of October. So we should be getting that presented to you all after we do the preliminary review. That's all I got.
That's quite enough.
That's
Thank
right.
you. There being no further business.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Off record at 6:30.
Hour and a half. Yep, good job.
I did my